Our guest is Liam Naden, researcher, teacher, speaker, and creator of the Transformative Brain Rebalancing Method, a powerful approach that helps people rewire their brains for success, peace of mind, and true fulfillment. Liam's journey took him from personal crisis to profound clarity, leading him to uncover how our brains are actually designed to bring us the life we want, especially when we stop operating from fear and start using the right side of our brain. In addition to helping people overcome personal and professional obstacles, Liam is also the host of the Using Your Brain for Success podcast and the founder of Growing in Love for Life, where he guides individuals through creating and sustaining lasting, meaningful relationships. Liam is not just talking the talk, he's walking it, living proof that we can grow more alive, more purposeful, and more in love with life and someone else as we age. Welcome to Don't Be Caged by Your Age, Liam. I'm so happy you're here.
Hi, Andy. Thanks very much for having me. I'm excited to be here as well.
So, Liam, let folks know where you're living right now and your lifestyle.
Well, at the moment, I'm anchored off a lovely little island on the coast of Italy in my catamaran yacht, which we've been on for 2 months. And this is the fourth yacht we've had. And we've also had a couple of motorhomes, my partner and I. Essentially, for the last 15 years, I've been a nomad, just traveling around, and a lot of the time on yachts, the last 10 years on yachts, mainly in Europe. And just going where the wind takes us.
Oh my gosh. And Liam, why water? Like, why a catamaran? What was it that compelled you to sail the seas versus travel the roads?
Well, I've done both, of course. I've had a couple of motorhomes as well. But what we love about the sea, there's a couple of things. Firstly, you get an incredible connection with nature. You know, being on the water, you can imagine just being, as we are here, anchored in a bay, no other boats around. You're right there in nature, and you're out in the, when you're sailing or when you're just at anchor, you're in the fresh air, you have birds and marine life around you. It's the closest, I think, we get back to being our natural selves, which is being connected with nature. And that's, apart from loving the sailing, my partner and I were both keen sailors, but it's just that feeling of freedom and connection with the natural world, of which, as we'll talk about, we are an integral part, and we've all forgotten it.
Well, and I also love that you pull into a harbor. And what a great way to meet people. There's nothing better than the folks who are on the harbor and doing their thing close to the coast, right?
Well, actually, we don't meet many people because we don't go to harbors. We stay at quiet little anchorages and bays. And we live the nomadic existence, really. But, the other thing, it gives me a lot of time to think, a lot of time to really evaluate how we get the results we do in our life and how I got the results I got out of my life. Because my partner and I, we've often looked at ourselves and said, we're so lucky, we're so grateful. How did we end up here? Because here's a little clue about what I've discovered is none of the stuff that you really want is going to be on your goals list. If I'd had a goals list a few years ago that to be on my own yacht, sailing the world, teaching about the brain and how we actually are designed to be thriving and not have problems and stress and struggle in our life, how we're biologically designed. If someone had said that that was your goal and you should have it on a goals list, I would have said they were absolutely insane. I didn't know that's what I wanted. I didn't know I could achieve it. So this is all to do with, I've thought a lot about this and I've done a lot of research about this. How did I end up here? And it's from a very different way, the reality, to what we've all been told about. You have to have a goals list and you have to figure it all out and know what you want and get clear. That's not how my life's worked. And that's not how it works in general for people, even though we all think it should.
You were singing my song, Liam. I was never a fan of this law of attraction thing where you were supposed to say, okay, here's my goal, right? Here's my intention. I'm going to be doing this. And how do you know if that's right for you? And what happens is when it doesn't happen, you sit there and you get into self-blame, self-shame. I did it wrong. It doesn't help the person at all.
And most of the time it doesn't happen. I tried that for years, for decades. I can admit that it was decades because I'm in my 60s. But for decades, I tried to figure out what I wanted, visualize, change my subconscious mind, change my beliefs, do affirmations. I used to carry cards around and read it about how much money I wanted and what I wanted hundreds of times a day. I'd listen to all of these subliminal recordings, to hypnosis. None of that actually worked. And I've discovered why it doesn't work. It sounds like it should, but it really doesn't.
And I am so excited to learn this, because when I stopped doing that, it was actually when the magic started happening in my life.
Likewise.
Yeah. So talk about that journey, because you have a fascinating origin story, right? And then that gave you enough contrast moment for you to go, okay, what's not working here? And how do I have a more fulfilling life? But also, I have that question that you and your partner had. It's like, how did this happen for us? Why us versus someone else or a whole bunch of people? So first, share a little bit about your origin story, and then let's explore more about the pivot moment where you said, okay, this intention manifestation stuff is not working. Let me find another way.
Well, probably like most of the people watching and listening, and you've intimated a little bit, maybe you used to be like this, but I always used to be this really driven person. I really wanted, from quite a young age, actually, I always felt I wanted to have a great life. I didn't want to just settle. I wanted to explore the world and be rich and, really push things and have an exciting, adventurous life. So I started out doing all the things you do as a child. I studied religion. I was brought up in a religious family. And my parents and teachers said, well, if you want to have a happy life, all you do is pray to God, ask God for what you want, and God will give it to you. I remember once when I was about 9 or 10 years of age, I decided I was going to test God on this one. And I was brought up a Catholic, and I went to morning mass at 6:30 in the morning at the local church, which fortunately was only around the corner, in the middle of winter, which fortunately was in Auckland, New Zealand, which is not that cold, but it is still pretty chilly. And I went to mass every morning for a month. Now, I don't know what the rest of the few people who were there thought of this young boy coming in every morning for mass, but I went and I said, God, I want one thing. You've said to me, ask and you will receive. Pray for something and I will give it to you. So this is what I want. And it's really specific. I want to win a competition at school. That's what I want. And I'm going to come here every morning for a month. And surely after that, you'll get the message and you'll let me win. Well, I didn't win.
Sounds like a good plan.
Made total sense on everything I'd been taught about, God and religion. So anyway, it didn't actually work. I didn't win the competition. So I thought, even in my young age, I thought, maybe this isn't quite the right answer. But I kept looking for the answer, and it took me down all sorts of rabbit holes. And after I left university, I studied music at university. And after I left, I went on this mission. I set up my own businesses because someone said the key to success is to have your own business and make a lot of money. So that's what I did. I went out and I set up my own business. It was the first of 18 different businesses that I've had throughout my life. Now I'm 103, not 63. But anyway, and I really worked hard in businesses and I was really successful, some more successful than others. And I became a multimillionaire and I did all these amazing things. I had travel, freedom, multiple homes, all of the good things in life. But along the way, I also decided I wasn't just going to study and learn to be a good businessman. I was going to study success. I was going to study how do you become successful. And I did all sorts of seminars and workshops and read books and did courses. And I had this huge library of tapes back in those days and videos and and books.
The Tony Robbins method.
I did it all, did the lot. The fire walks, did it all. And I was an expert on success as well. I knew all about goal setting and all the things we've talked about, reprogramming your subconscious mind, changing your beliefs. I'd done so many goal setting workshops and I had it all mapped out what I wanted. And there I went along and I thought, well, this is what you're supposed to do if you want to be successful. And maybe it's working because I am making lots of money and I am having this amazing quote unquote lifestyle. But something happened when I was in my mid-40s. So here I was. What actually happened was that I was just putting the finishing touches on my dream home. And you might have heard the story before, but it's really, really important to understand what happened as a result of this. But I was just putting the finishing touches on my dream home. And I mentioned earlier that I was a musician earlier on. And my dream home that I had written down, pictured, had a music room in it. And this home had a music room. I'd always thought it'd be wonderful to have a music room where I could go and lose myself in playing music, which is what I love to do. I used to play the pipe organ. I even had a pipe organ in the music room of this dream home. But I remember going in this particular day, and it was a lovely day, and the sun was shining on the mountains. You could see the mountains in the distance. And I sat down and I said to myself, you know, Liam, you've done it. You've made it. You've reached all your goals. Isn't this amazing? You've manifested, if you like, this dream house that you always wanted.
It's everything from your vision board.
Exactly. And you've got 2 businesses that are making money for you. You've got a family. You've got all of these things. You've got the freedom to travel and do whatever you want to do. But, you know, I thought to myself, yes, I've done all this. I should be really grateful. I should be so satisfied. I should have this incredible feeling of satisfaction and joy. And you know how I felt? Absolutely miserable. I was almost in tears. I was shaking. I was so stressed, so unhappy, because I had lots of problems in my life. Not everything was going well. And I just felt this emptiness. And I remember saying to myself, or a voice or something came into my mind where I said, you know, is this really what it's all about? Maybe I should just throw it all away. Maybe I'd rather lose everything I've got than lose my soul. Because this is what it feels like, my energy, my life force. And it doesn't matter what I do. Things aren't getting better. I'm not feeling any better. I'm working on really trying hard to make everything in my life work and achieving goals. But all these problems keep showing up in my life. And then I solve the problems and fix the problems and I learn some more. And then more problems come along.
Yeah, it's a whack-a-mole.
So maybe I'd be better to throw it all away. And that, you know, the funny thing was, a few weeks later, that's what happened. I lost everything. I lost the house, my businesses, my marriage, all my money. I literally ended up with the clothes on my back and a few other things.
Oh my!
And I had to move in with my elderly mother and sleep on the sofa in the living room of her small apartment. And she was in her 70s and she was going out to work to pay for my food. It felt terrible because here I was. It wasn't just losing all my stuff. If that was all it was, if that had been my choice to lose everything, it would be different. But I lost my sense of identity. I went from being this person in control of my life, I thought, you know, I had the money, I had all the structures, I knew people, I knew what I was doing, and I had a nice bed to sleep in at night. I went from that to, who am I? What is this? I didn't know myself anymore. And the biggest thing that happened was I became totally confused. And I kept asking myself 2 questions. And every night I just spent so much time trying to find the answer to these questions. And the first one was, why has this happened to me? I know how to create success. I've spent my entire life studying how to make sure this doesn't happen to you. Because it wasn't on I had my goals lists in those days, but it wasn't on my goals list to lose everything. Certainly not in my mid-40s where I built up everything, you know, spent my lifetime building this up. So I thought, why has this happened to me? It should never have happened to me. I'm an expert on success. I can quote all of the books that tell you how to avoid this happening, you know, have the right beliefs and all those things. So why am I here? And the second question was, what do I do now? And, you know, the funny thing was, I kept asking myself, I'm in a strange town. I don't know anybody. I haven't got any money. I've got people calling me wanting money that I don't have, debts. What do I do now? And I couldn't come up with an answer to either of those questions. And I kept asking, why has this happened to me? And what do I do now? And finally, I discovered the answer. And it was the same answer to both questions. And that's when everything changed.
Oh my gosh. So what happened? I'm on the edge of my seat.
Well, I discovered the answer for me. And, you know, we'll explain what the answer is. People might be thinking, so what was his answer? Why did it happen to him? And what did he decide to do next? Here's the answer. Why has this happened to me? What do I do now? The answer is, I don't know. I have no idea why this has happened to me and what to do now. And what I didn't realize is when I accepted I didn't know the answer, that this part of my brain that was concerned with thinking and analyzing and analysis, figuring things out and judging things and analysis, when I realized that the answers weren't there, I actually moved to using a different part of my brain. And that's when things started to happen, because things started to happen pretty quickly after that. It was only a little while after that I got a part-time job working for somebody in their retail store, sitting out the back doing a bit of admin for an administration paperwork. Big come down from having my own businesses, but helped me scrape by, because I thought I've got to get off my mother's sofa if nothing else. Anyway, I had went out and get a breath of fresh air, and I went into the store, and there was a man standing there, and I recognized him vaguely, but he recognized me. Now, we hadn't seen each other for 25 years. And he looked at me and said, "Liam, hi." And then I remembered who he was. He'd someone I'd met through, I used to teach about wine, and he was in one of my classes. And he said, "Liam, what are you doing now?" And I didn't want to admit what I was actually doing. I said, "Oh, not a lot." He said, "Well, don't know if you're interested, but there's an opportunity for a business that's coming up right next to where I have my business. You'd be perfect for it. It'd be ideal for you," because he knew about my background. I said, "Well, that sounds nice, but the problem is I don't actually have any money. I couldn't do it." But literally within a few weeks, 2 or 3 months, there I was in my own business again, and I was making good money. It all just happened. Now, how did these things happen? They didn't come from my analysis and struggle and trying to figure it out. It just sort of happened. It wasn't a fluke. It wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't synchronicity. It was to do with how the brain works, how the brain actually creates results in our life. I didn't know any of that at the time. But anyway, after that, things started to fall into place. They were like dominoes. Just before I knew it, I found a new partner, the one I still have, and we have a completely different relationship to one I'd ever had before. Then we set up another business, and then we bought a new motorhome and traveled around my home country in New Zealand for 18 months, just living the nomadic life. And then we took a one-way ticket and a suitcase to Europe. And a year after that, we launched our own brand new yacht.
Oh my gosh. Listeners, I am just so blown away by Liam's journey. We're talking with Liam Naden. He's the creator of Brain Rebalancing Method. Please visit liamnaden.com. Connect with Liam on LinkedIn and follow him on Instagram at Liam Naden. That's Naden. So let's talk about that part of the brain. I love nerding out about the brain, and I know there's ways to help our brain work for us that's healthy and not stressful. So share what you learned as you started to say, well, why us?
Well, maybe I could really fast forward to answer that question, because, life turned out to be really magical. And then I said to myself, I need to figure out why this has happened. How come I'm living on a yacht with 2 businesses that are working for me? And the best part is I don't have any problems. I don't have any stress. I've got a great relationship. I'm healthy. I've got businesses giving me all the money I need and no problems. I don't have to worry about it. That's what got me thinking, I do have a problem. I need to find out how I created this, because I've done it in a completely different way, and nothing to do with what all the books said you did. Because I'm not setting any goals. I'm not chasing opportunities. I'm not trying to learn more information about how to do something. Things are just falling into place. And I'm playing my role. I'm obviously, doing what needs to be done, but I'm not getting stressed about it. I'm not trying to force things. So that sent me down one track. But, something, and I haven't really shared this with, you're the first person to share with this on a podcast, is something I've learned more recently, which is very profound, and it's the topic of my book that I'm writing at the moment. And what happened was just over a year ago, my life was going really well with doing what I love to do and freedom and no stress. But one thing that concerned me was my health, because as we get older, things start to not work so well. And and I'd studied health done the Tony Robbins health stuff as well. You mentioned Tony Robbins. I'd done it all, and my partner, we'd given up gluten, we'd given up sugar, given up alcohol, meat, all of this stuff. And yet I still wasn't healthy. And we were taking a stack of supplements every day. And gradually things were starting to go downhill with my health. Not super major, but things like my heart started to develop in a regular rhythm. And I went to so many cardiologists and they said, oh, it's natural, it's aging, and here's a drug that you can take to fix it, to fix the symptom, but it's nothing to worry about. And I had pancreatitis, which meant my pancreas stopped working so well, and I had gallbladder surgery to remove my gallbladder. And I thought, there's something not right here. And I had a consultation with a nutritional doctor who said, what's missing is you just need this supplement. And I already had this stack, this huge bag we carried around with all of these supplements. And we used to say to each other, my partner and I, is this really making a difference, this supplement? So what I decided was I was doing something very wrong. It was the same with what my lifestyle was earlier. I was doing something wrong with my health. And I came across and studied something very interesting. And that was, we think about cavemen and we have this image of people who lived short, brutal lives. That's not actually the truth. For 300,000 years, which is how long humans have been around, we actually live better than we do now. All the diseases we have now didn't exist. We were taller. We had things like teeth problems, weak bones. They just didn't exist. People were far healthier. They lived a longer lifespan, and they were also happier and more fulfilled. And I didn't realize that. I thought, well, I'm going to try that diet. If it was a much healthier diet. Now, it was a really difficult diet to go onto, but I transitioned onto it. A week after I started the diet, all my heart palpitations stopped.
Oh,
and I had more than a dozen. My heart just went back to normal.
Would you just start eating meat? I'm thinking, what were the cavemen eating?
They ate a fat diet. They ate meat. That's all they ate. They didn't eat plants. We talk about hunter-gatherers. We weren't hunter-gatherers. We only ate plants out of desperation when there was nothing else. But we thrived in this environment. We were nomadic hunters, and we ate meat. And that's what my partner and I do now. And more than a dozen health problems that I had, they've all gone away. I'm not on any medication. I mean, problems I didn't even know I had have gone away. I've got amazing energy, far more than I had. I don't crave food. It's just a completely different world. But what it led me to realize was, I thought, what else were we doing back then that we're not doing now that caused us to thrive and be a lot healthier and better? And it turns out we were using our brain completely differently. Because something happened 12,000 years ago. Humans have been around for about 300,000 years. And most of that time, we thrived. War was unheard of. There was no conflict. There's no evidence in the anthropological records or anything else of any conflict amongst humans. There was no violence, apart from maybe very occasionally. There was no wars and there was no hardship in the sense there was no starvation. There was no famines. There were no diseases. There weren't cancers and heart problems and all of these things. But something happened 12,000 years ago and everything changed. And after that, that's when all the problems came along. That's when all the wars and dysfunction and unhappiness, we weren't unhappy either. We lived naturally. And a couple of things happened 12,000 years ago. One was agriculture. And what agriculture did was it got us starting to eat the wrong foods, grains and things that we weren't suited for. And we know they weren't right for us because the health of the population immediately just went down. Our brains shrank, our bodies shrank. We developed all of these bone problems and diseases. So we're not built for that. And the other thing that agriculture does is you have to have a system. You have to have people working in the fields. Instead of being a nomadic hunter who just wanders around and eats like the rest of nature, just finds food when you need it, and it's always there. We had to plan, and we had to plant crops and plan for the future, and we had to get organized and have systems. And that all led, of course, to the growth of, instead of being nomads, being stuck in one place, setting up a town or a village or whatever.
Moving.
And what did that bring? It brought things like control. You had to have hierarchy. You had to have someone in charge, and you had to tell everyone else what to do. And we went from this life of freedom, where we worked maybe 3 or 4 hours a day to get the food we needed, to working 12 hours a day. We went from a life where we didn't have diseases to being sick, to having starvation, to having wars, people arguing over, you've got some land and I want it. You've got something that I need. I'm going to take it off you. All this conflict only started 12,000 years ago. And I thought, why, in my research, why have people done that? Why have we gone from a life where we absolutely thrived without disease? Why did we agree, if you like, or settle for a life that was much harder, much shorter, much more unhappy? Why did we do that?
Right.
And it came down to a fundamental difference. We started to use our brain in a different way. And it's the way we started using our brain that caused all the problems, because the brain was not designed to be used this way. It had 280,000 years of development to be used in a certain way, to be used in a natural way that made us thrive. All of a sudden, we were using it in a different way, and we wondered why we had all these problems and struggles and stress and living unnaturally. And that's what it came down to.
And so, again, I'm on the edge of my seat. How do we use our brain now? And by the way, I'm a huge fan of that diet. I find that especially as we age, we need our protein and we need it from animals. So it can be maybe in the form of the whey protein we get from milk or from the meat. But yeah, with all due respect to the vegans out there, I am happier, more stable, even keeled when I have animal protein in my diet. So this is fascinating to
I was
me.
I was a vegan vegetarian for nearly 30 years myself.
Yeah.
But what I didn't realize, it comes down to this: your brain is 30% fat. Your body, the fuel for your body is fat. It's not sugar. And all carbohydrates and sugars, they are basically sugar. And your body is not designed over 300,000 years to eat sugar. And the other thing about plants, this isn't really just a quick thing, plants have all these things called oxalates and anti-nutrients and things in them designed to make them not be eaten, because nothing wants to be eaten. So animals have got a defense mechanism. They can run away. Plants can't run away. So they put poisons within them to deter people or animals from eating them, which is why, kids don't like Brussels sprouts, because they don't taste good. They're not supposed to taste good. But anyway, where were we? We were getting
No, but this is great information.
Yeah.
We get marketed to, okay? The brands and marketing folks and folks who want you to believe a certain thing. It's always listen to your body. I know that comfort food for me, like a big bowl of some really good, it can be Italian flour from France, doesn't matter. I eat my big bowl of pasta. I'm not having the good day the next day or two.
No.
It's just how it is. But at the time when it's going down, I'm loving every second of it. But these are the things we have to do, is listen to our bodies and understand what we need as humans. And what I really love about you, Liam, is that you are an explorer, not just a problem solver. You're exploring frontiers that folks haven't thought about, and you've done your research and you've assimilated, collated, curated this information and had some wonderful aha moments that you have gone not only and implemented in your own life, but now are sharing with everybody with your work at liamnaden.com. Listeners, if you're enjoying this conversation as much as I am, I'd love to have you join the movement of pro-aging and celebration of pro-aging. And you can do that by sponsoring this podcast. You just have to hop over to buymeacoffee.com/Ande Lyons. And just for $5, you can sponsor the podcast and help amplify inspiring voices like Liam's and break age-related stereotypes and help me reach more listeners worldwide to help them thrive at this really important time of life. So thank you for joining me on this journey of joy and possibility. It's so wonderful to have you all on board with me. So here's what I'm finding so fascinating. We know the brain can be utilized, but in special ways to help us have a more fruitful life. But now you're saying we haven't been using our brain in the way it was originally meant to be used. And so because we have our frontal lobe, we have this lobe, that lobe. Like, where are we going here with this, Liam? What did you find out, and how can we use our brain moving forward, especially given most of the listeners here are over 50 and are looking for ways to create even more meaning in the remaining 20, 30, 50 years that they have?
Well, here's the thing. It comes back to basics. Just as you and certainly I did with diet, when I went back to the diet that we were actually designed and built for, that our bodies were built for, everything fixed itself. I didn't need drugs or chemicals or therapies or exercises. It all just sorted itself out, all of these issues. And our brain is designed as well to make us thrive. Because here's something really important, and this is something I've uncovered, which is the law of thriving. There's a natural law of nature called the law of thriving. And what the law of thriving says is that every living thing is designed to live at its best so that it has the greatest chance for survival. So everything is wired not to struggle, not to have problems, not to have roadblocks, but to be its best, to thrive, And if you look at the rest of nature, and I'm privileged, I spend my time in nature, that's what you see. I know we've all watched wildlife documentaries with the lion chasing the wildebeest and how terrible it is. That's not how nature is. Nature works with superb efficiency. It spent millions of years to figure out the most efficient way to use the least amount of energy to ensure that every living thing gives itself the greatest chance for survival. So it's all built on least resistance and doing the right things. So when you go back to doing the right things, just like with health, you don't need to figure this stuff out. Your body, your brain, your whole being already knows what you need to do to thrive. And here's what happened 12,000 years ago when we stopped thriving. And we set up all of these things that made us eat the wrong foods, do the wrong things, and bring all this conflict and dysfunction into our life. We started to use our brain, as I say, the wrong way, a different way. And you know what we started to do? You know what caused it? Language. For 280,000 years, we had no language. We didn't have words and symbols. Now, people might say, well, that's primitive. How can you operate without language? We operated with instinct. Because in your brain, there's a part of your brain that I call the thriving brain. And that's the part of your brain that's designed to make you the best that you can be. The brain is designed for 300,000 years to work like this. It's where your inspiration, your imagination, your creativity, your awareness, those gut instincts that you get about doing something, the little voice, it's where you just know stuff. And it's where you're directly connected to the natural world, to yourself. We talk about mindfulness and, being present. When you feel in the flow, when you feel really alive, your thriving brain is what's operating. Now, this is different to your thinking brain. And what happened was, when we introduced language, and I've got theories as to why that happened, what we did, we created a disconnect. Instead of experiencing life directly, we started to create stories about life. So we said, instead of saying this is just looking at our body, we'd say that's a hand. And we'd create separation. We'd see that there was somebody else who had a hand as well. So we started to label things and instead of creating a direct experience with life, we started to create stories about life. And the most fatal thing we did, because we could do that, we started to create imaginary stories about the future. We always live totally in the present. If you don't have language, if you don't use words, you don't think about the present. You're not focused on that. You're thinking about, you're focused on the present, about the future, I should say. You're focused on the present. And our whole brain, our whole body has always been designed to perfectly manage the present moment. But here's the problem. When you start creating stories about the future, there's another part of your brain which is about managing dangers and threats. So now that's great. You're walking along in the forest and a lion jumps out. There's an immediate threat. It makes you feel fear and anxiety, and you deal with that threat. But when we start creating stories, this part of the brain, which is always on the lookout for threats and dangers, something that might stop us from thriving, it starts to see those stories as well. And we enter the state where your brain, it can't just solve the problems that you've got in the present moment, which is what it's designed to, because it doesn't see that the future is any different to the present. It sees it all in the right now. It has no sense of time, this part of the brain. So it sees all of these problems that are in your future, and it's spending all its time trying to solve those. So, yes, you've got enough now. So we never used to think about that, or not think at all when we were living instinctively. But when we start to think, we go, well, yes, I've got enough now, but maybe I won't have enough in the future. Yes, I've got everything, but that person's got more, and maybe I'll need more. So I need to fight that person to get more. So the brain, this is how the brain became totally overloaded and doing things it was never designed to do. It's not designed to figure out what you should do in the future, because there is no future. It's not designed to analyze things. It's designed to get you to instinctively do the perfect thing in the perfect moment to make you thrive, to make you the best that you can be, and to live in a state of awareness, not this storytelling we do all the time. We're running, these thoughts, and our thoughts are out of control.
Well, and also we have the indoctrinated thoughts, right? The stories that were planted in us and what we're supposed to be doing as a woman, as a man, as a child, as an older adult. I'm always talking about how they can bring limitations as well as fears into your everyday.
But what we're doing there is we're trying to replace stories with other stories.
Right.
And what I'm saying is the story is the problem.
I'm with you 100%. And I'm also seeing that what you're talking about would also be very helpful for loneliness, because everybody's become an observer, right? So they're observing stories, they're observing like online all what everybody else is doing. They're reading these stories about what everybody else is doing instead of being in the present moment and connecting, whether it's with nature or someone else. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, well, it all comes down to a fundamental lack of understanding about who we are. If we really knew, and your religion tries to tell us this, but we don't listen, what it says is, if you really trust, and if you believe in a God, and that God wants the best for you, it wants to make you have the most amazing life, everything you want, which isn't necessarily what you think you want, but everything you really want, to be really happy and fulfilled, that's what God wants for you, and God has the ability to give it to you. So all you need to do is trust God. We don't do that, because what does trusting God mean? It means stop trying to figure out what you should do, trying to figure out what you should have. Leave that to God or the infinite intelligence, this thriving part of you that's designed to make that happen. It did for nearly 300,000 years. We didn't have to think about it and try and question it or doubt it or analyze it or try and change anything. We just instinctively did the right things. This is why the Bible says, do not worry about tomorrow. Tomorrow will take care of itself. Do not worry about what you shall eat, drink, and wear. It will all be provided for you. But don't be afraid. Just allow it to happen. That's the way we're biologically designed. So when we get this thinking going, we messed up the whole thing.
So let's move into something else that you've helped people out with as well, which is loving and lasting relationships. I've been with my darling man, second husband, for just about 40 years. We met and fell in love in 1985 and have been able to work through all the challenges, all the vicissitudes of life, and have such a rich and meaningful relationship to this day. Talk about how you are also helping folks with that, because sometimes we lose our beloved spouse or partner as we age and we think that's done. It's all over. I'll be a solo flyer. And I'm sure there are many women who are like, I'm okay with that. But for those who do want to share life with a partner, talk a little bit about that, Liam, because you've done some great work around that.
That's where I started on this journey, was really helping people with their relationships, and particularly people who are really struggling with their marriage. But one of the places I looked for clues to start with was most people don't have fulfilling relationships, certainly not after a few years. Things become stale, or at best they become stale, and often they really go off the tracks and they're not fulfilling, and they end up in divorce or a lot of conflict. That is unfortunately the majority. But there's a small group of people who, like you, after 40 years or however a long time, you're still in love, and your relationship is still rich and rewarding. And it's like, you see these people sometimes together and they're teenagers. They have the best friends, and
we laugh, we sing, we're playful, we're still very intimate, all the things.
So I really did some research and observation. What was the difference between these people? What were the ones doing fundamentally who had these great relationships that most people weren't doing? And I really got to the core of what they were doing, and they were using their brain differently. It comes as it turns out. It didn't come down to techniques or even sort of compatibility, if you like, or just luck. They were doing something very specific with their brain. And what they were doing was, or what characterized their relationship that other relationships didn't have, is they had no fear. These people who have really special relationships, they're not worried about the relationship. They're not worried about where it goes. And one of the things they're not worried about is where they think it should be and if it will last or not. You know, they're just, what they do is they enjoy the moment, and they have this belief, I love this person, we're probably going to be together forever. But if we're not, if something happens, well, that's okay. I'll be okay. I don't need to have this relationship for me to be happy.
Right.
It's not my source of happiness. I'll be okay. Life will look after me. God will look after me. Not necessarily in these words, but this is the gist of what people are subconsciously thinking. So when you are in a relationship and you don't have any fear, you don't have any expectation about it, you don't expect your partner to behave in a certain way, you don't expect yourself to behave in a certain way, you don't expect certain things to happen, and you're just there because you love it. And when you think about it, that's what you were like when you first met that person that you're married to, for anyone listening or watching. You didn't have any fear or expectation. You just loved being there, and you accepted them for who they are. And when you do that, then you can be yourself. You can be your thriving self. You can be, because fear blocks your thriving brain. And when you're your thriving self, your brain, just like it does with every other aspect of your life, is going to bring you exactly what you need to be your best. That's what it was designed for 300,000 years to do. It's the same with relationships. So if you've got problems in your relationship, where you need to look really deeply is, what fears do you have attached to that relationship? Are you worried it might not work out? Are you worried that, I talk to people and they're like, their husband or wife's told them they want a divorce. They turn out a mess because they're so worried. Oh, it means the end of our dreams. Our children are going to be really badly affected. I'll never find anyone else. I'll be on my own for the rest of my life. I won't have any money. I won't know what to do. So they have all these fears and terror about the end of their relationship. And what happens? They do all the wrong things. They push their spouse further away. They don't trust that maybe if it's the right relationship, it'll heal itself. If it's not the right relationship, it's no longer the right relationship, their brain is sending them a message that it's no longer right for you. But your brain, infinite intelligence, will look after you. You don't need to worry about what you shall eat, drink, or wear, or you're not a failure. You won't need to worry about what people are going to think, or if you're going to have regrets. You're going to look back and it'll all be perfect. Everything is going to work out. And then you do the right things to either heal that relationship,
right,
or if it's not in trouble, to make it even stronger, or you go, hey, this isn't the right one for me. It's time to move on. Either way, everybody wins.
That's right.
So that's the fundamental difference.
Yeah, and you have the right pillars in place for the transition. And that's
so you don't need to focus on a technique, or if I say this to my partner, then they're going to love me more, or I better not say that. And that's the problem I have with therapy and counseling a lot of the time, and why it's not very effective is it's just focusing on all the noise, the thinking, the words, the language, the problems, analysis. And that's why it doesn't work. You're not focusing on what fundamentally is causing the behavior.
That's
and that is whether you have your brain working right.
Oh my gosh. This is such a good conversation. Liam, as our listeners are sitting there and exploring, okay, I've reached an age where I want to still feel purposeful and living a life that has meaning and lights me up, might fuel passion, fuel my pocketbook, do all the things, but I'm having a hard time because there's so much fear as you age. Talk a little bit about how we can really make use of this time of our life with your rebalancing the brain method.
Well, I think we're all at a huge advantage because what we have is experience. And all of the things that I've been learning about how the brain really works, how we're designed to operate, which is going to be in my book and is what I teach already, and which creates natural health and natural thriving without all the struggle. This wouldn't have come to me, A, when I was younger, and B, if I hadn't studied all that other stuff first. Right. So the great thing about us being old is we have the experience. And someone who's out there struggling and trying to find purpose and meaning, I'm sure you've done a lot of stuff to try and figure it out already. But none of it, you're still stuck. You're still got the same lack of fulfillment and lack of thriving that you really want. But you've tried all the stuff. You've read all the books. So you know none of that works. So maybe it's about time saying, like I did with my health, and said, the truth is something's not working. Fundamentally, I need to do something radically different, and I need to find out what we used to do when we didn't have all of these problems in our life. So when it comes to using your brain, you know, we talk about trust and allowing. What you need to do is forget all of that. You need to understand, because it's understanding that will create the trust, that will create the allowing. You know, oftentimes we say, well, I allow and trust. We're not trusting, we're hoping, because we don't understand how it works. I mean, do you hope or that the sun is going to rise tomorrow? Or do you just know it will? You know, do you hope you're going to keep breathing at least for the next few minutes? You just know you're going to, your heart's going to keep beating. Your body, you don't think about it all the time and worry about, oh, is it, you know, is my muscles, am I going to be able to lift my finger and do all? There are trillions of gazillions of things happening every second that you just know that's the way it works. And this is the stage we need to get to with understanding our brain. And this is what I teach. So you get to the point where you don't question it. You just know that's the way it works. You know, I often use the analogy of someone coming out of the forest who's a caveman, a tribesman, and he's never seen a motor car. And there's a motor car. And he says to the person, what's that? And they say, it's a motor car. They say, what does that do? Well, it's a machine. It's a vehicle that gets you from where you want to be to where you want to go in a really fun and easy way. So they wander off, and you the caveman think, well, I don't know how it works. Well, I see it has wheels. Maybe what I need to do is I get behind and I push it. That'll get the machine to where it's supposed to go. So you get behind and you put all of this effort and motivation, and nothing happens except you get exhausted. And then you stop and think, I'm the problem. There's something wrong with me. I'm not motivated enough. I'm not trying hard enough. Maybe I need to do a course in building up my muscles, or learning how to do it, push the car differently and better. And you tell yourself, I will get there. I will succeed. And you do all these mind games, and you still keep trying to push the car, and nothing ever happens except you getting worn out. And someone comes along who told you about the car and says, why are you doing it so difficult? And so that's not how it's designed to work. And the reason you're doing it, it's not because you're hoping or trusting that it's going to work. You just don't understand how it does work. Now hop in, sit down, here's a lever, here's a button, here's a switch. This is what you do. And that's how it works. And it's forget all the difficulty, all the struggle. Because remember what I said at the beginning, the world is not built on struggle. The world has spent millions of years to avoid struggle, to find the most efficient way to survive, to eliminate the struggle. And that's the way we used to do it for 288,000 years. Struggle wasn't a part of our existence, despite what we've read in the books. It's simply not true. So that's what we need to do, is focus on saying, I'm going to understand how my brain works, how this works, how thriving actually works, how we used to live, in a way that then I don't have to try and learn some fancy way of doing anything, or hope, or try and force it. It'll happen naturally, so that people will come into your life. You'll get ideas. You'll start, goodness knows.
Liam, yeah, I'm living this right now, because in the beginning of 2024, I said, I want more local friends, right? And, friendship as you get older can be a little more challenging. And I want to feel in community. I want to be working on something that's bigger than me, right? I didn't know what that was going to look like. It turned out the idea came in, everything came together to make it happen. I've just been like watching it all unfold. Exactly. And it's this phenomenal community, the New England Podcasters Group. I have never felt so tuned in and turned on. I'm a 4 times founder, from tech to food, etc. This has been, because I let go and let it happen, so amazing. And it speaks to what you're talking about. It's like a fine example. So thank you.
Well, you're a perfect example, because your brain, it already knows what you should do. You're dealing with an intelligence here that's been built into you, like the whole of nature. It knows what you're supposed to do and how you're supposed to live to be your best. And being your best doesn't just mean healthy. It means being happy. It means being excited and fulfilled. Your brain already knows that. But if you try and use this thinking part of your brain, all you're going to do is keep messing it up. You've just got to let this part of your brain, the thriving brain, and this is biology. I'm not talking about some spiritual woo-woo idea.
Liam, please tell folks how we can follow you, continue to learn from you, buy from you, so we can continue to grow and flow in our own lives and practice the law of thriving.
Absolutely. Well, great. Yeah. It's just all on my website, and I see you've got it up there. It's just my name, liamnaden.com. And I've got a lot of information there about how your brain works. My podcasts are all about, more understanding more about who we really are. And, we've been so led off track to think life's hard, problems are good for you. Everybody's got problems. It's just life, and we're the intelligent ones because we can think and create all of these wonderful technologies that bring us a lot of stress and dysfunction as well.
Yeah.
Ancient man didn't have chairs, but they didn't have back problems either. Why is it we've got all these things to try and fix us when we've got when we should be living healthier lives? We're not. So it's all on my website, liamnaden.com, because what I'm really trying to share with people is what I said, an understanding of this. I spent years following these gurus who said, well, let's just do this, read this out, and everything will happen. And set your goals this way. And none of it worked for me, even though I tried really hard. In fact, it didn't just not work. I ended up losing everything. But what really worked was when I got out of my own way and thought, there's a part of me that's not my thoughts. And remember, we haven't had thoughts for very much of our history. And all the time when we were our best, and that huge period of history where nature was working out the best way for us to live, to thrive, we didn't use thoughts. So I'm not saying you give up thinking entirely, but you need to use thoughts, not have it use you, not have this thing where you're relying on your thinking to create your life, to figure stuff out. That's not the way it works. The brain is just not designed to do that. And that's what's created all the problems we have in life today, because there are people who don't have problems when they use their brain the right way. It sounds a big ask in one way, but it's just the way nature works.
I love this. I love this conversation, something fierce. And thank you, Liam, for joining me from Italy, where clearly you can be on the ocean and still have great Wi-Fi. The connection's been wonderful.
Italians love their phones, so they'd never be out of Wi-Fi.
Oh my gosh, that's wonderful. Listeners, let us know what you think about this new way of using our brain. It's actually an old way. We just have to go back to it based on Liam's wonderful research and understanding. Let us know how you are seeking to thrive after 65. And please remember, the world is not done with you yet. Of course it's not. You're still here. It's a privilege to age. So let's find out some more about what your purpose is, what opportunities are out there for you, and don't give up on that. You don't have to think your way. You don't have to fear your way forward. You can allow wonderful, magical moments happen, especially when you get that driver out of the way. And I'm speaking as a recovering driver. I really know how to get shit done. But at the same time, it's also allowing and being expansive and outrageously open. Liam, thank you for joining me for this outstanding and oh so delicious conversation.
Thanks so much for having me, Ande. It's been great to be here. Thanks.
Cheers, everyone from Boston. Mwah! Listeners, I'm so grateful you carved out time to tune in and grab the gems from this delicious conversation. Be sure to hop on over to Don't Be Caged by Your Age on LinkedIn or Instagram to share your thoughts about ageism and unretirement. Because in this space, your age doesn't define you, it refines you. If you are inspired by a story you hear, it would mean the world to me if you would subscribe, share, rate, and review the podcast. To receive an alert whenever a new show is posted, please join the Don't Be Caged by Your Age newsletter. Every month, you'll receive links to the podcast and helpful resources for creating possibilities for your unretirement days. Thank you for tuning in. I am so excited to hear how you found ways to thrive after 65. Waving from Boston, cheers.